Some stories are so disturbing you swear they have to be fiction, right? Well, this one is terrifyingly real. And it all starts in a place you would never ever expect. Today we're going to dive into the making of an American monster, Ed Gein.
So picture this. It's 1957 in the tiny, quiet town of Plainfield, Wisconsin. A sheriff walks into an ordinary-looking farmhouse, and what he finds inside is nothing short of hell on earth. This single discovery would uncover a truth so grotesque, it would change the face of American horror forever.
Okay, so let's start with the House of Horrors. Our story really kicks off on November 16th, 1957, and it starts with what seems like a simple disappearance. A local woman, a hardware store owner, has just vanished. The missing woman's name is Bernice Warden. Her son, who just so happens to be the deputy sheriff, goes to her store and finds it empty, with bloodstains on the floor. When he checks the logbook, the very last customer listed is a quiet, kind of odd local handyman, a guy named Ed Gein. The police head out to his isolated farmhouse, but they aren't thinking he's a suspect yet. They just figure, hey, maybe he was the last one to see her. Maybe he's a witness.
But when they get inside Gaines' home, they don't find Bernice, at least not at first. They find something else. The air is thick with this just awful stench. The whole house is dark, cluttered, unbelievably filthy. In fact, the smell was so bad the first sheriff who went in had to run back outside to vomit before he could go back in. What they were about to find would haunt them for the rest of their lives. As their flashlights cut through the darkness, the horrors just start to reveal themselves. And the weirdest part, these gruesome things were just being used like everyday objects. The first things they saw were bowls made from the tops of human skulls. And it just got worse from there. As they searched, the discoveries became more and more unspeakable. They found a belt meticulously crafted from human nipples. I mean, can you even imagine? Over in a corner, they found a collection of masks, but not made of leather or cloth. No, they were made from the preserved faces of dead women. They later identified one as belonging to Mary Hogan, another local woman who had vanished 3 years earlier. And then they found the most disturbing thing of all, a full torso suit, complete with breasts made from tanned human skin. His attempt to become a woman. The police had found their monster for sure. But the question that was screaming in everyone's minds was, who was Ed Gein? And what in the world could possibly create a man like this? To even begin to understand the killer, we have to go back, way back. Edward Theodore Gein was born on August 27, 1906, into a household that was basically a pressure cooker of abuse and fanaticism. This is where the roots of the monster began to grow. Ed's world was shaped by two really destructive forces. You had his father, George, who was a violent alcoholic, but the real architect of his mind was his mother, Augusta. She was this domineering, religious zealot who controlled every single aspect of her son's lives. Augusta's whole worldview was that the world was a sinkhole of filth and sin. She taught Ed and his brother that all women, except for her, of course, were evil, sinful instruments of the devil. And to protect them from this world, she moved the family out to a completely isolated farmhouse in Plainfield, cutting them off from everyone. This one twisted lesson would become the absolute core of his future obsession. So as Ed got older, all this toxic isolation and psychological torment just started to curdle into something way more dangerous. The little world Augusta had built for him was about to completely crumble, leaving him all alone with her poisonous ideas just rattling around in his head. His world just fell apart in a series of tragedies. First, in 1940, his father died. Then, 4 years later, his brother Henry died in a suspicious fire. Officially an accident, but some people now think Ed was involved. But the final blow, the one that broke him, came in 1945. Augusta, the absolute center of his universe, died. And for the very first time, Ed Gein was completely and utterly alone. Left alone in that silent farmhouse, Gein's mind just shattered. He sealed off his mother's rooms, keeping them perfectly preserved like a shrine. He got obsessed with these pulp magazines about Nazi medical experiments and human anatomy. And then, driven by this desperate, twisted desire to somehow resurrect his mother, he started robbing graves. His goal? To collect skin and body parts to build that woman suit,
so he could literally crawl into his mother's skin. But pretty soon, digging up the dead just wasn't enough. His obsession demanded fresher materials, and the grave robber escalated into something far, far more terrifying: a killer. His first confirmed kill was Mary Hogan, back in 1954. She was a woman who some people said looked just like his mother. He shot her in her tavern and took her body back to his farm. 3 years later, he killed Bernice Worden for the same horrific reason, and it was that murder that finally brought the law to his doorstep, connecting all these terrible pieces together. After his arrest, Gein stayed completely silent for 30 hours. And then, in this moment that just reveals his deeply disturbed, almost childlike mind, he makes a single request. He wanted an apple pie with cheddar cheese. Once they gave it to him, he confessed to everything: the 2 murders and digging up the corpses of 9 different women. Of course, the court needed to understand what was going on in his head. A psychological evaluation came back with a diagnosis: severe schizophrenia. He genuinely believed he could still hear his dead mother's voice guiding his every move. This diagnosis actually made him unfit to stand trial, at least at first. The evaluation also confirmed he was a necrophile, which helped explain his grim fascination with the bodies he dug up. So his crimes were this truly awful blend of mental illness, a twisted devotion to his mother, and a complete inability to separate fantasy from reality. Gein was eventually tried in 1968. He was found guilty of murder, but also legally insane. So he wasn't sent to prison. Instead, he spent the rest of his days locked away in a mental institution, and he died there in 1984. And so the man himself was gone. But while Ed Gein's life came to a quiet end, the story of his horrific crimes was just getting started. His case file basically became a blueprint for some of the most terrifying villains you've ever seen. Seriously, think about it. A disturbed loner who's obsessed with his domineering mother? That's Norman Bates in Psycho. A killer who wears the skin of his victims? That is Leatherface from the Texas Chain Saw Massacre. A murderer crafting a woman's suit from his victims? That's Buffalo Bill in The Silence of the Lambs. This quiet man from Plainfield, Wisconsin became the secret father of modern horror. And all of this leaves us with one final, really unsettling question. The story of Ed Gein is a horrifying look into the absolute depths of human madness. But it also forces us to wonder about that fragile line between a troubled mind and a monster. And to ask ourselves, are they born or are they made?